Hello there and welcome to another video series by Easy Academy. In this particular video series, I'm going to be talking about some of the fundamentals of the HTTP protocol as well as the JavaScript object notation, syntax and data format, because this is very crucial as we're going to be using these foundational concepts to cover a lot of the things that we experience when we're working with data stores, data workloads like Apache Kafka, Apache Flink, and Elasticsearch, and all those different data stores that use and leverage these protocols. I'm going to be talking about REST APIs. I'll be talking about some of the status codes, some of the request methods, and some of the things you have to pay attention to when you're dealing with data that is in JSON format. So let's take a look at some of the objectives we're going to be covering in this particular video series. It will be several videos in the series, and as time goes on, I'm going to be building up on some of the foundational concepts, and then I would go into more advanced topics and advanced details as some of the fundamentals are covered. So we'll talk about the HTTP protocol, the origin, and some of the things you have to care about when creating JSON data or trying to validate JSON data. I'm also going to do a deep dive into the request methods, when to use each one, and also what the status codes mean, the different versions of HTTP that you need to pay attention to. Then we'll take a look at JSON data structures, schema validations, and all those things. Some of these things might appear as if they're just very basic, but they are very fundamental and they're very important, because you may end up spending a lot of time trying to troubleshoot something that is very, very basic and you just don't understand why it is giving you problems. So that's what I'm going to do a deep dive into, because I see that some of you have questions about some of these things when we're dealing with Apache Kafka, Apache Flink, Elasticsearch, and all these different data workloads that do integrate HTTP endpoints as part of the mechanisms for you to interact with them. So it is very important for us to cover this thing. Now, if we are designing or developing microservices, I will also talk about some of the things you have to pay attention to when you are building your own microservice that is HTTP based, or when you're trying to test one that someone has created, or interact with some of the ones that we have with some of the core data stores that we're using. And then we have some of the clients, something like Postman, JMeter, curl. Some of these things are some of the tools that you're going to be using to interact with this. And then I will show you some of the examples, and then we'll do a deep dive into them as we continue in the video series. Some of the data workloads that are using HTTP and JSON include popular ones like Elasticsearch, Apache Kafka. You may wonder, why does Apache Kafka have HTTP and JSON? Well, if you're working with something like Kafka Connect, the only way that is exposed for you to interact with creating different connectors, registering the connector, deleting the connector, modifying the connector, you can only do that through HTTP endpoints for Kafka Connect. The REST proxy also has another endpoint that you can use for Apache Kafka, and that also is purely HTTP. So as you can see, some of these things are very, very fundamental. And if you don't understand how HTTP works and how to send the JSON data, and when you may think that something is correct, but you're actually incorrect in sending the data or receiving or understanding what you're receiving, you could see why this would be a problem. So I'm going to spend some time to cover this. For Elasticsearch and for Apache Kafka, Apache Spark and Apache Flink also has some HTTP components to them. And then some of the cloud services, like the ones from Google, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft Azure, there are several endpoints and several services that are purely HTTP based. So it is very important for you to understand all the different components when you are interacting with HTTP endpoints. To summarize what we have covered, this is going to be a multi-video series talking about the fundamentals and important concepts of HTTP and the JavaScript object notation that you have to pay attention to when interacting with core data engineering services. And then I will cover the request methods, which ones to use and why we're using them, the status codes, the different versions of HTTP, the data types and formats, and also when you're trying to validate the schema, some of the best practices when you are designing or testing your microservices, and then some of the clients that we can use. Now, I have an example that is running here in my local environment. so we can do some sample testing, and I will show you the example that I'm going to be using to demonstrate all the different request methods. Like when you're trying to create a new record, you have to use post for that. Retrieving, you may have to use get. Modifying, and then modifying just some of the components of the record, and then you may use patch, and then when removing you may use delete. So this is just glancing through all the different ones that are possible, but it is important for you to understand why we're using each one, why we send certain things in the path, certain things in the request bodies, what we should expect in the response body, and all those different things you have to expect. So we'll also cover some of the clients that you can use when interacting with these things, like Postman, like JMeter, like curl, all those different clients that we can use. I will cover them and show you when to use them. And then we'll also take a look at some of the testing strategies and testing methodologies that are available for interacting and validating the expectations and the outcomes and the output from these REST endpoints. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this intro to this video series. Please take a look at my channel. If you have not subscribed already, go ahead and do that, and click on the like button for this video, and also share with someone you think would benefit from it. And if you are on Twitter, please do subscribe and follow my Twitter handle, and also check out my content on easyacademy.com. If you have the need to work with data, you're doing data engineering, or you're trying to process data, or learn how to process data, learn how to store data, learn how to analyze data, I have a course on Udemy that will show you exactly how to do this. So check it out and let me know what you think. And if there's any content that you are thinking about or you would like me to talk about, please do put it as a comment in this video, and I will take a look at that, and that would influence how I work with and develop the next set of content for this video series. I thank you very much for your time for this particular video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.